Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Chard. But then most of you are from Chard, so you'll know where you are to begin with. My name is Rick Pallister. I'm the leader of the District Council, and for some bizarre reason, Sue asked me to fill in for 2 or 3 minutes to begin with. This is our first opportunity in South Somerset to have this sort of exchange with the police at all levels. And actually, I think it's really quite important because we're in a changing world. We're in a changing world for all of us. We're all shrinking. Anywhere in local authority words is shrinking. It's getting less. And of course, we've all had to cope with huge financial cuts. And the police are one of the major players that are being affected. So Sue and John this evening are going to give us their overview of where life is going with the police. But you know, one of the things occurred to me. I was at a community event at Westfield last week in Yeovil. And they were discussing various issues to do with crime at Westfield. The police were there as well. And somebody said, oh, well, you know, speeding. And that was sort of pretty much it. And then one of the residents said, he said, sometimes I think we can't remember how much has changed. He said, I can remember the groups of youth standing on the street corner, the crack houses that were being closed down. And when he talked about speeding, it was serious speeding in those days. Where's it all gone? And it has disappeared, not completely. And you can still find it at the bottom of Yeovil on a Saturday night. I've no doubt you can find it in bits of Chard from odd occasions. But actually, if you think back, I think whether we're in rural areas or whether in the main urban conurbations, it's different to how it was 10, 15 years ago. It's no good hoping that somebody will nick your car radio so you can get a new one, because nobody knows what to do with it if they could ever get it out of the car. That's assuming they could get in the first place. So when you look at that sort of thing, the changes are huge. And with it, of course, means that we will have changes to the police. We're all shrinking, as I said initially. That means we're all trying to move into smaller buildings. And alongside us, I think we are looking to try and ensure that the police, wherever possible, and social services, and the other services that belong to the public bodies that face onto the public, are in a location that's accessible to everybody in the middle of our major towns, which probably means we're going to end up being co-located. I don't want to be in his cell, but I'm quite happy to have us, the facilities that the customers want to access, i.e. the general public, you guys, are all in the same place. It makes absolute sense. I've said enough. Over to you two. Who's going to start? Sue starts.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rick. And I'd probably just have to do some of the housekeeping rules that if there is a fire, there's an exit there, an exit there. And I'm sure we'll cope. That's the end of the housekeeping rules. Well, thank you, Rick. I think it's really important. I think one of the things that Rick said is that, yes, I can speak up. Is that better? Right. Okay. If I start not using the mics too close to me, then wave, and I'll wave back, and we'll see if we can make sure you can hear me. But what we need to do is that we need to work very much closely together with local authorities, with as many agencies as possible. We are all going to have smaller workforces. We're all going to have less money, and we've got to be able to provide a great service for you as our customers and as our residents. After all, that's what you're paying for. And we need to do that. The only way we can do that is by working together. So the more that we can exercise the potential of being co-located in the same places, trying to get the staff all to be multi-skilled, then that will be beneficial. We've managed to do that in some places in Avon and Somerset, and I believe that is a way forward. But first of all, let's tell you about what's going to happen tonight. Is that I will talk about what I do as a police and crime commissioner. Then John Long, who's the acting chief constable, will tell you about the operational issues. And then for more local issues, then Jeff Wessel, the area superintendent, will do that. After three of us have spoken, then it will be over to you, and we'll then do questions and answers. Okay? So let me tell you a bit about my role as the Police and Crime Commissioner, which I shortened to PCC. being your voice in policing and how we can work together. So I stood as an independent candidate in end of 2012. I've never stood for anything before in my life. I am not a party animal of any shape or form in many ways, but I have never been particularly interested in party politics. But with a background of, I was a magistrate for 15 years on the family, youth and adult bench in Bristol. I was on the independent monitoring board at Bristol Prison, and I was on the police authority for the last 2 years before its demise. So you can see I have a real interest in the criminal justice system. And when this job was advertised, which is how I regarded it as very much a public interview, was that this role should not be held by a party politician. I felt that it was absolutely right to be completely impartial. The policing is a hard enough organisation, a more difficult, complex organisation, without bringing party politics in. So I decided to put my money where my mouth was and decided to stand. And amazingly, 125,000 of you decided that you too would support me. So maybe there's even a few of you in this room that did. And if you didn't, that's fine too. But it has been a challenging role because no one quite knew what a police and crime commissioner was going to do. And if you think about it, when the elections came round, you were being asked to vote for someone you didn't know, to do a job you didn't understand, in a time of the year when no one votes. So I think getting just under 20% of the vote was actually quite a miracle. I couldn't understand why the press gave us such a hard time, to be honest. And I hope that whether you like or you don't like what I do, I hope the success of a police and crime commissioner will be in the number of people who go out to vote next time round, so May 2016. And that's the important thing to remember. If you look at your NHS, if you look at the various organisations, you've never had the option to actually boot somebody out if you don't like what they do. And this is a real democratic chance for you to be able to do that as someone who oversees the police. So if you don't like what I do, then you can kick me out. And that will be the first time ever that you'll be able to have done that. But what I am not is I am not operational. That is very much for the Chief Constable and very much for all his officers and PCSOs. I have no command and control, direction and control over anyone like that. Some of you will have heard me say that I wouldn't mind having a bit of direction and control, and I would love to be able to put a blue light on the top of my car when I'm being overtaken at 90 miles an hour with someone on their mobile phone, just to scare the heebie-jeebies out of them. And my kids would be really impressed too if I could do that. However, but that's not the issue. So the day-to-day job is that of the Chief Constable. But my responsibility is to appoint the Chief Constable and to hold him to account. I set the police and crime plan based on your priorities, having consultation with you. I also set the police part of the council tax precept. Now, the budget is just about £270 million in the year. And we've already got to find another £15 million in the next 2 years. We've already found £35 million. In the next 2 years, we've got to find £15 million. By 2016, 2017, we'll have to find an additional £50 million. So you can see that we are going to be a smaller workforce. Now, my role is, the only control I have is on the council tax precept. And I went out to consultation over most of last summer and talked to and consulted about just over 3,000 people. And over 75% of you actually said that you would be prepared to pay between 2 and 10% increase on your council tax precept because that's how much you valued the police. However, the government then decided that there was going to be a referendum cap at 2%, which is why I had the ridiculous figure of 1.99% in order not to invoke the referendum, because the referendum would mean that I would have to spend £1 million of your money. I'm not prepared to gamble £1 million of your money, especially with we might lose as well. So that was why we did 1.99%, which equates to, for an average D householder, that equates to an additional £3.34p a year. So you pay just over £170 a year for your policing. I'm also responsible for commissioning community safety services, and in Safer Somerset we've been able to double that amount of money year on year. So Safer Somerset had £350,000 in this year, which they can spend through the community safety grant, which is looked at and reviewed by your community safety partnership, so Safer Somerset, about how they can cut crime and keep people safe. But tonight I'd like to highlight two particular areas, because I'm here to connect your views with the police. I'm only as good as PCC as the stuff you tell me, because I'm representing your voice. And I think one of the reasons that PCCs are working, and I would say this, wouldn't I, being one, is that I am very easily identifiable as one person who replaced a committee of 17. So if you think about in the last year, the police authority had just over 250 people who contacted them. I already had over 5,000 people who contacted me. And if you think about it also, that some of the cynics amongst you will say, I bet they're all complaints. No, they're not. But they are people who want to give feedback to improve their police service, and that's what I'm here for. I want you to regard Avon and Somerset Constabulary as your police service, and how can we improve your police service, and that's the information that I want to get. So I do that by having things like this. I also spend one day a week out in the communities listening to people who are what I call the quiet voices, who are below the radar, who don't know necessarily how to lobby organisations like me. So I came down to Chard and I hosted a public drop-in session at the cafe. Is it Elios Cafe? Brilliant cafe, brilliant. Could have stayed there all day. It was lovely. It was. But anyway, don't want to give adverts out. I'm sure I'm not allowed to do that. And local people came in and they discussed with me about police station opening hours, the cadet schemes, local beach surgery. So it was a whole range of things. And that's what I do. So I go out because I want to make sure that if people want to speak to me, that they can do so. So I also went to the Chard Young People Centre as well to hear about the projects that they were doing and to view the facilities, and also just to hear from young people about what they think about the police service and about how safe they feel. Because one of the issues that I've heard from far too many young people is that the reason that they go to youth centres is they go there to feel safe. Now to me, when I grew up, I went to youth clubs because it was to meet my friends and everything else, never because I felt unsafe anywhere else. And I just think that's a pretty sad indictment, actually, of where we are, that our young people go there because they feel protected. But it's important that I go out and I listen, and I try to listen with both ears and speak in a fewer proportion. But one of the topics that you have raised with me through social media and other ways is about your concern about your PCSOs in Chard. So first of all, let me reassure you that I am listening, and that the detail of the PCSOs will be discussed later by my colleagues. But let me first of all assure you that you, as far as PCSO is concerned, that you have over half the PCSOs in Somerset. No, half the PCSOs in Avon and Somerset are in Somerset. So you already have a greater proportion of PCSOs because that's how they were first introduced. But I'm acutely aware of how important your PCSOs are. I never go to any meetings where the PCSOs do not get a rave review, because they have the time to listen and to create relationships with local people when there is not a crisis. And that's why we do need PCSOs. I understand that completely. But we've also got to do that against a backdrop of making sure that all the policing teams are working closely together. So that will be talked about later, but we have to look at the makeup of instead of working some of our teams in silos, making sure that we can join them all together, because when we do have a smaller workforce, and we will have because we have less money, we've got to use our resources just much more wisely. So, and it's not only, of course, the various organisations, the various teams, but we've also got amazing organisations such as working with Rick and the District Council, but also we have, the street pastors as well, and such organisations which are really helpful, making sure that it's not just left for the police to sort this out. It has to be done by the community. I'm sure I will also get some questions about about Chard police station. Let me just remind you that half the police stations in Avon and Somerset are more than 40 years old. So we can't always keep all of the police stations open. We don't actually need the police stations. When you have a smaller workforce, we have too many buildings, and if we need to close some of the stations and co-locate in similar areas, but it doesn't have to be in a particularly dedicated station. So I'm sure I will be asked about that. But I just wanted to make it clear that if the stations aren't needed by the police, they are not visited very, very often by the public. And when we've got less money, if the choice is buildings or people, and that's what it will come down to, okay? You tell me you want your people to be, the police to be more visible. You don't tell me that you want empty buildings with no police in them. And that's a tough decision that we've got to make. It's not a great decision, I'm not saying, but I'm just saying that when you've got a lot less money, those are the choices. Last year I published the Police and Crime Plan, which was 6 local plans. One of the things that have come back from local people is that they want much more local police and crime plans. So now South Somerset has their own police and crime plan for the first time, and there are some at the back. The priorities in the plan remain unchanged, having consultations, but we've added to them. So the priorities were reducing the impact of antisocial behaviour in your community, tackling domestic and sexual violence, particularly violence towards women and children, preventing and reducing burglary and the fear of burglary in your local area, and putting victims at the heart of the criminal justice system. So those are the priorities which will be maintained over my 3 years tenure, and I'll talk about road safety in a minute, about one of the things that have come out. We've also got an action fund which we put in £200,000 from the Proceeds of Crime Act and some of the speed awareness course money into that, and there's some details at the back that out of that action fund for small organisations, groups, charities, residents or whatever, you can apply for grants of up to £5,000 where you can have, because I've discovered that you've got some really great innovative ideas, and just for want of a small amount of money you can get some cracking projects off the ground. So we've given over £1,000 to Arches Extra to support a project which works with young people in Langport, and in the whole of Somerset we've got about 21,000 we've given out. But if you don't apply for it, I can't give it to you in Chard. So please find out more, because I'm sure you've got some really great innovative ideas. I'm also responsible for commissioning local victim services in the next year. We've got to do a lot better for victims. I think there's been a lot of concentration within the whole of the criminal justice system on perpetrators, understandably enough, but not enough on victims. Victims are the blameless ones. They've had no choice. We can do a lot better by having a much more bespoke service and not move them from post to post like a parcel, because we need to look after them and make sure that they need, invariably victims want two things. They want to know how their case is being progressed or not, they just need to know, and they also need emotional support if they need to help them recover, and that's what we are building on and getting that over the next year. We're also funding the development of victim-led restorative justice, and obviously Chard led the way as far as community justice panels are concerned, and that was one of my very first meetings, in fact, during the campaign, was with Val Keach, and she was the one who explained to me about the importance of actually taking sometimes the victims and the perpetrators out of the criminal justice system, because victims don't get necessarily satisfaction out of courts, because courts aren't built around giving satisfaction to victims. They're there in order to bring the offender to justice. That's not putting necessarily always the victim first. And sometimes the community justice panels is actually, they get much greater satisfaction from there. In fact, it's nearly 90% for victims. If they've been through a community justice panel, they feel very satisfied with the way that the outcome is. But road safety remains one of the most important issues for South Somerset. I can tell that by the size of the mailbag that I get on that. And it's making sure that we work with all the communities, whether it's Community Speed Watch, whether it's Neighbourhood Watch, whether it's Farm Watch, making sure that the police and all the watches work together so that we can be much, much stronger. And the constabulary have now launched a new website, so I'm hoping it's far easier for you to be able to find out how you can get involved with the constabulary and find out what's going on in your local area. And equally, if you know of someone you think that is the gel of your community, again, I have met some absolutely what I call the silent heroes who get very little public recognition. And so I've launched a Pride Award that will give them that public recognition and to say a very big thank you on behalf of local communities. I don't think we do that enough. So again, I can give you some more information on that. That gives you a very brief outline about what my role is. I would encourage you to be open and honest today, to be as constructive as possible. But before I finish, I would just like to praise the officers and PCSOs and staff for all their hard work in keeping us all safe. On the radio this morning, I don't know whether you heard, over 400 officers in England and Wales are assaulted each week. Now, when people sign up to do this job, there is always the potential, but I don't want it ever to be part of something that they expect, and because it is not acceptable. So on your behalf, I would like to say a very big thank you to Avon and Somerset Constabulary, and on my behalf, I'd like to say thank you for listening. So I'll now hand you over to John Long.
Thank you, Sue. Good evening, everyone. My name is John Long. I'm currently the Acting Chief Constable of Avon Somerset. I've been a Chief Officer with the force for something like 6 years now and taken on various roles in that time, and always tried to get a good sense of what's happening out on the ground in policing terms, whichever community we're talking about. As it was pointed out earlier, even in the 6 years that I found myself as a Chief Officer in the constabulary, the news about policing, notwithstanding that we know we're in a period of austerity, and I'll come to that in a moment, but the news about crime and disorder and antisocial behaviour on the whole has been very encouraging. We have seen crime reduce, and I know there are arguments about whether crime figures are accurate and so on, but if we look at the surveys that are done with members of the public around levels of crime, they also tell us that there are fewer victims of crime. Still far too many, of course, but crime has reduced in recent years. The business of policing obviously extends into lots of other areas, and my belief about policing is that in everyone's hour of need, the moment of crisis, there should be a police officer or member of staff who can respond quickly to that and help people deal with the problems that are just a little bit too big for an individual or a community to contend with. So the way we provide that service, quickly, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, occupies a lot of my time as a chief officer and my colleagues. Avon and Somerset's got a very rich variety of policing challenges, and in this part of the world we commonly find ourselves policing events like Glastonbury, various carnivals, the terrible experience people had with the floods on the levels, of course, not so long ago. Policing needs to be able to respond to all of those things as well, bring in expertise to it, work hard with people and protect communities in those sorts of situations. And at the heart of all of that, for me, has been how in the last few years there has been very much a determination to maintain a neighbourhood style of policing. And at the heart of the strategy that we have in our policing approach in Avon and Somerset to reduce crime and deal with things